Admiral Wilhelm Franz Canaris remains one of the most enigmatic figures of the Second World War, a man whose life embodied contradiction, subtle resistance, and moral complexity. Born on January 1, 1887, in Applerbeck near Dortmund, he grew up in a prosperous family that valued discipline, education, and public service. This environment inclined him toward a military career, and at 17 he entered the Imperial German Navy as a cadet. His early service coincided with the rise of Germany as a global naval power, and he quickly distinguished himself through diligence, intelligence, and an aptitude for foreign languages. When the First World War broke out, Canaris served aboard the cruiser Dresden, operating off the coasts of South America. He experienced major naval engagements, including the battles of Coronel and the Falkland Islands. After the Dresden was cornered by British forces and scuttled in 1915, he avoided internment through a daring escape that would become part of his legend. Moving across Chile, Argentina, and Spain through a mixture of disguise, linguistic skill, and improvisation, he eventually made his way back to Germany. The episode showcased a natural gift for intelligence work and established him as a man capable of bold, quiet ingenuity. The remainder of the war found him deeply involved in naval intelligence operations, particularly in Spain, where he honed the methods of covert observation and political maneuvering that later defined his career. After Germany's defeat, Canaris chose to remain in the shrunken Reichsmarine. The interwar years brought political instability and military limitations, yet he continued to rise through the ranks. He earned a reputation as a cultured officer with sharp analytical instincts and a capacity for subtle diplomacy. Although a nationalist who believed in Germany's renewal, he felt little affinity for the crude radicalism of the Nazi movement. When Hitler came to power in 1933, Canaris accepted the new regime as many officers did, hoping it might restore national strength, but he retained a private distance from its ideology and methods. His manner, reserved and understated, allowed him to navigate the changing political climate without public conflict. In 1935, he was appointed head of the Abwehr, Germany's military intelligence service. Initially regarded as a loyal and conventional officer, he was entrusted with reorganizing and strengthening the agency. Under his leadership, the Abwehr expanded its networks across Europe and built a reputation for professional competence that contrasted sharply with the more ideological intelligence organizations of the SS. Canaris, however, soon grew increasingly uneasy about the regime he served. The mounting repression, anti-Jewish laws, and aggressive foreign policy led him to question the direction in which Hitler was steering Germany. By the late 1930s, he was discreetly helping persecuted individuals escape the country by manipulating bureaucratic channels and issuing protective documents. At the same time, he fostered relationships with officers and civilians who were beginning to contemplate resistance. When war erupted in 1939, Canaris performed his duties outwardly but privately, sought to mitigate the regime's excesses. During the invasion of Poland, he witnessed atrocities committed by German units and returned to Berlin deeply troubled. From that point onward, he became part of a quiet internal opposition. Using the Abwehr's administrative independence, he shielded figures such as Hans Oster and Hans von Dohnanyi, who were engaged in more direct resistance activities. His headquarters at Tirpitzufer became a hub for clandestine planning, protected under the guise of intelligence work. Canaris preferred indirect methods of resistance, believing that subtle sabotage, bureaucratic delay, and carefully placed disinformation could weaken Hitler without drawing immediate retaliation. He discouraged foreign powers from aligning too closely with Germany and undermined reckless military initiatives by manipulating intelligence assessments. His cautious approach stemmed partly from an acute awareness of the danger he faced. Himmler and the SD viewed him with suspicion, seeing the Abwehr as a rival to their expanding intelligence empire. As the war intensified, the rivalry between these agencies grew more bitter and personal. Canaris operated under constant surveillance, forced to maintain an outward appearance of loyalty while working quietly against the system. By 1943, as Germany's fortunes declined, resistance networks became more active. The Abwehr's involvement placed Canaris in an increasingly precarious position. Discoveries of documents linked to conspiratorial circles heightened Gestapo suspicion, though he managed for a time to evade direct accusations. In February 1944, he was removed from his post and placed on administrative leave, an implicit sign that the regime no longer trusted him. The failed assassination attempt against Hitler on July 20, 1944, led by officers such as Claus von Stauffenberg, provided the final pretext for dismantling the Abwehr entirely. Although Canaris had not been involved in planning the attack or aware of its timing, many of his closest associates had participated. The Gestapo arrested him soon after the coup attempt and began interrogating him in connection with the conspiracy. He was held first in Berlin and later transferred to Flossenburg concentration camp. During his imprisonment, he maintained a quiet dignity, denying direct involvement in plotting but unable to dispel suspicion. In early 1945, the Gestapo discovered a secret diary he had kept during his tenure as head of the Abwehr. Though not a confession, the diary revealed his disdain for Hitler and documented activities that could be interpreted as subversive. This discovery sealed his fate at a moment when the collapsing regime was lashing out at perceived enemies. In April 1945, with Allied forces approaching, Hitler ordered the execution of major resistance figures still in custody. Canaris was subjected to a perfunctory tribunal at Flossenburg, a proceeding lasting less than an hour and devoid of any legal substance. He was condemned to death alongside other prisoners connected to the resistance. On April 9, 1945, Wilhelm Canaris was hanged. Witnesses described him as composed in his final moments, facing death with the calm of a man who had long accepted the likely consequences of his choices. After the war, his legacy became a subject of intense debate. Some viewed him as a heroic resistor who risked everything to undermine a tyrannical regime, while others criticized him for caution and ambiguity. Modern assessments tend to portray him as a man whose opposition evolved gradually, shaped by moral shock and strategic insight, rather than ideological conviction. He was neither a conventional hero nor a passive bystander. He acted from a deep sense of personal responsibility, using the tools available to him within a dangerous and oppressive system. His subtle methods of resistance saved lives and provided cover for more overt conspirators, even if they lacked the dramatic clarity of direct action. Canaris remains a symbol of the moral complexity faced by individuals living under totalitarian rule. His story illustrates the tension between duty and conscience, the peril of resisting from within, and the quiet forms of courage that often go unnoticed in the shadow of grand events. He died at the hands of the regime he had served publicly, yet worked tirelessly to undermine privately, leaving behind a legacy marked by secrecy, sacrifice, and the difficult choices forced upon those who stand against tyranny from within its own ranks.